Bandicoot Retrospective. Press start to begin.
The year is 1994, and a very interesting trend is going on in the video game industry at the moment. Many movie studios are now creating their own video game divisions. We saw the rise of companies like Disney Interactive Studios, Warner Bros. Interactive, and the studio that is of interest today, Universal Interactive Studios. Being a new studio, they were excited to get small-time, no-name video game companies to create games based off of their properties. While at the Consumer Electronics Show, almost like it was destiny, they had a booth next to who would soon become their business partners for their most successful venture in gaming. This little-known, no-name company searching for publishers showing off their game Way of the Warrior was none other than Naughty Dog. Universal Interactive Studios gave Naughty Dog an offer they couldn't refuse. They offered them a space on their lot and free reign to create 4 games for them to publish. With that, Naughty Dog founders Andy Gavin and Jason Rubin were off on a cross-country trip, moving from Boston to LA. They didn't waste any time though. On their road trip, they were doing research, going to a bunch of arcades, seeing what types of games were the most popular right now, to give them inspiration for what to make themselves. Though at first thinking of making a beat-em-up game based off of Final Fight, all of that changed when they started imagining Donkey Kong Country, but in the 3rd dimension. Noting that they'd be staring at the character's back the whole time, they gave this project the very well-known title, Sonic's Ass Game. They brought this idea to Mark Cerny, one of the leading programmers not just at Universal Interactive Studios, but in all of the video game industry, having his hand in developing Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and creating the Sega Technical Institute. Mark Cerny loved the idea of the Sonic's Ass Game and decided to run with it. No pun intended. They decided to develop it for the new PlayStation console because they did not have their own mascot yet and knew that they could snag that spot. They signed on with Sony, paid $30,000 for a PlayStation development kit, and got right to work. When picking what characters should play the leading role in this game, they wanted to pick a real animal that no one has ever heard of. They were stuck between using a bandicoot, a wombat, or a potoroo. As you may have predicted, they decided to go with the wombat. Thus, Willy the Wombat was born. They ended up scrapping this name for 2 reasons. First of all, they thought the name sounded way too dorky, but also, Hudson Soft already developed a game called Willy Wombat in Japan, so that would have been a complete nightmare. That's when they decided on the character we all know and love, Crash Bandicoot, named after what he does to the many boxes in the game. Now that there was a hero, they needed a villain. While eating lunch one day, Gavin and Rubin were talking about the villain being an evil scientist with a giant head. They wanted to make an actually dangerous and evil version of the Brain from Pinky and the Brain. After going back and forth on what this scientist would be like, they immediately came up with the name of Dr. Neocortex. With these 2 characters created, they hit the ground running and assembled a team to create this monumentous game. Fun fact, did you know that one of the artists that tried their hands at creating a design for Crash was actually Butch Hartman, the creator of Fairly OddParents and Danny Phantom? That's always a funny tidbit that I think is super cool. There's so much more I could get into when it comes to the history of this game, so if you ever want to see me do a super duper deep dive on the development of Crash Bandicoot, let me know in the comments. Without further ado, the year is 1996, and Crash Bandicoot has just been released on the PlayStation. Will PlayStation's and Naughty Dog's first attempt at a mascot be as fruitful as Mario and Sonic, or will Crash be seen as one of the stinkers like Bubzy? Let's find out. In the southeast of Australia, there is an island that had a laboratory on top of a giant tower. In this laboratory, there were 2 evil scientists that were planning world domination. These 2 scientists are Dr. Nitrous Brio and Dr. Neocortex. Their plan was to use Dr. Embryo's Evolvo Ray in order to mutate the wildlife of Australia into anthropomorphic beings, and then to use Cortex's Cortex Vortex in order to brainwash those animals to become a part of his army. That's when we get to the creation of what should have been his general. Crash Bandicoot just got done being put in the Evolvo Ray and was making his way towards the Cortex Vortex. Brio warns Cortex that the Cortex Vortex is highly unstable and isn't ready to brainwash Crash. Cortex decides to throw Crash in there anyway and, as you'd expect, the machine fails. This gives Crash the ability to spin as an attack and gives him the chance to escape, falling out of one of the windows. Cortex then tells his minions to prepare the backup Bandicoot, Crash's girlfriend, Tawna. Crash washes up 2 islands over on Insanity Beach, where he meets Aku Aku, who decides to help Crash save the world against Cortex. Through fighting all of Cortex's minions and generals, Crash finally makes it up to Dr. Brio, who turns himself into a monster during their battle, setting the tower on fire. In a last-ditch effort, Cortex tries to take care of Crash himself and ends up falling to his doom. Crash meets up with Tawna and lives happily ever. We don't see her again for a long time. There is also a good ending that you get from collecting all of the gems, but this ending is completely non-canon. It goes on to say what happened to everyone after the events of the game. Papu Papu opens up a big and tall shop after selling Cortex's castle, Ripper Roo got intense therapy and went to college, Koala Kong became a Hollywood star a la Sylvester Stallone, Pinstripe started a sanitation company, Dr. Embryo went back to his original hobby of tending bar, and Cortex disappeared, never to be seen again. For a first go at the story, this game does an amazing job setting up its world and giving its characters, well, character. When it really comes down to it, the plot of this game is that an evil scientist wants to take over the world, kidnaps your girlfriend, and you have to go save her. It's all the little character moments in between that create this world. Ripper Roo is insane, Koala Kong is a narcissistic bodybuilder, Dr. Embryo being the twitchy mad scientist, all of this shown with barely saying any words. It's impressive just what they've been able to accomplish using mostly just animation and game mechanics. With all of that in mind, Crash Bandicoot's story gets my rating of an A+. Crash Bandicoot is the most bare-bones basic a platformer can be. You run, you jump, and you attack. That's it. No frills, no pillows, no special moves, just bare, basic, unmistakable, undeniable, irrefutable, unjustifiable, egotistical power struggle at the expense of the American dream, the American dream, the American... What I'm trying to get at here is that there really isn't anything too special about the gameplay of this game. It's a game where you run, jump, and spin your way from point A to point B, and every so often there's a boss fight thrown in. The boss fights were pretty cool, but honestly, nothing too spectacular. A lot of the boss fights just rely on Crash waiting until he can attack. It's not very engaging. Hell, Koala Kong, you can just stand in one spot and spin for most of the fight, and that's literally the strategy for defeating Pinstripe. Now, does that mean I'm saying that the game is boring? Absolutely not. It does the bare basic platforming game very well. Levels are fun to go through and are designed very well. It is very strange the way you save in this game, however. In most other games, you save either automatically or when you hit a dedicated save point. In this game, you must do one of two things. You must either find a stage that has a Tawna bonus, get in there by getting all 3 Tawna tokens, and then beat the bonus stage to be allowed to save. This is the most asinine way of saving I have ever heard. That would be like if in Sonic the Hedgehog if you weren't allowed to save the game unless you completed the special stage first. The other way to save is to obtain the gems, but trust me, even though it allows you to save more often, you do not want to try to get the gems unless you are truly dedicated to the game. But more on that when we get to the completion section. It's just such a strange way to handle saving that I wonder who the hell came up with it. No other game on the face of the planet saves its progress like this. The platforming is engaging and keeps you on your toes pretty much the entire way through a level. It just is definitely the first game in the series. With all that in mind, Crash Bandicoot's gameplay gets my rating of a B+. When I think of the quintessential PS1 aesthetic, one of the games I think of is this one. Though the graphics of this game look primitive, do not mistake that for me saying that this game looks bad. For 1996, you know, the same year that Super Mario 64 came out, this game looks pretty stellar. Going from lush populated jungles to mechanical factories, the game does a great job at conveying everything. It does look a bit blocky at times though. As for the music, it's good. There's definitely a bunch of standout tracks like Insanity Beach and Hog Wild and literally any of the boss themes. As for the rest of the tracks though, none of them are bad, but they're pretty average. I think the only track in the bunch that I kinda dislike is the one for Heavy Machinery with that obnoxious brass part. Make it stop! With all of that in mind, Crash Bandicoot's presentation gets my rating of an A-. Oh my god. Completing this game is brutal. To complete Crash Bandicoot, you must complete all 32 levels in the game to be awarded 56%. This is honestly the easiest part of completing Crash Bandicoot. Getting through every level is all just a matter of perseverance. As long as you keep trying, you'll eventually get through all of the levels no problem. To get the next 3%, you must collect the 2 keys to unlock the 2 secret levels in the game. The way you get the keys is that in 2 stages in the game, Sunset Vista and Jaws of Darkness, you must collect all 3 Cortex emblems in order to get to the Cortex bonus. Getting to the end of the Cortex bonus awards you the key to unlock Whole Hog and Fumbling in the Dark. The last completion requirement you need to get the final 41% is to collect every gem in the game. This is where the real challenge comes in. In order to collect a gem in this game, you must break all of the boxes in a stage and do it without dying a single time. In the beginning, this isn't so bad. As long as you're careful, you can get through it just fine. It's when you get to the 3rd island in particular where this starts to get brutal. You're all talking about how hard Slippery Climb is? Fucking please! Fumbling in the Dark took me literally hours to get the gem in. It is insane how difficult this gem is to get. As hard as it is to get all of the gems, I have to point out that once you do get the gem, it is legitimately satisfying to accomplish. I honestly felt very proud of myself whenever I finally got them all. With that being said though, I do have a couple of major complaints when it comes to getting the gems. First of all, there are what I'm dubbing asshole crates. These are crates that are literally just off screen that you are expected to just know are there. Fumbling in the Dark is especially guilty of this, having 4 boxes behind the starting point in this hallway that has nothing but a pit in the middle. That's cruel. There is no indication that any of this is here unless you just happen to stumble upon the secret. Even in Road to Nowhere, there's these hidden boxes as well. What's the hint that these exist? The only reason I knew they were there in my first run is because I've played this game before. This leads me to my other complaint: the way missing boxes are handled. There is no worse feeling than finally getting to the end of a stage without dying, only to learn that you are missing a single box. There is no indication beforehand that you are missing anything, which makes this game very non-completionist friendly. There's also a lot of instances where backtracking is necessary, and there is almost no indication that you aren't able to get the gem due to a colored gem path, until you find the colored gem, which just makes it more frustrating when you get to the end of the stage just to see it has a gem path, making all of your efforts to get here without dying all for nothing until you get that colored gem. There are a lot of quality of life changes this game could make that would make it more completionist friendly, and I hope that in the future they take those steps. Do I recommend completing this game? It's hard to say. Though completing it is a Herculean task and will cause a lot of frustration, it does genuinely feel satisfying every time you finally obtain a gem. It feels like you accomplished something. I'd say if you're looking for a challenge in your Crash Bandicoot game, it wouldn't hurt to complete the game just once, just for the experience. Crash Bandicoot is the poster child of a good start. Not a great start, but a good start. With a story and characters that are conveyed surprisingly well for the era, gameplay that is simple yet effective, presentation that, though blocky, is completely serviceable, and a frustrating yet rewarding completion requirement, with all of that in mind, Crash Bandicoot gets my overall rating of an A-. Not the best start in the world, but still a start. Thank you everybody so much for watching this video, and if you like the Crash Retrospective, please like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one, and hit that bell so you don't miss the next episode. We also have merch in the description below where you can get our shirts, mugs, and stickers to enrich your gameplay experience. I'd like to give a special shout out to Andrews Retro Games and Daniel Hawkins for being the most well-esteemed guests of them all. You could also become a channel member to get all of these videos when I'm finished editing them, as opposed to when they're scheduled to come out. Next week, we'll be looking at the next Crash game in the lineup, Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back. With that, I'm Bottles, and I bid you, my well-esteemed guests, adieu.